What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Anthony Bruno Show. I am Anthony Bruno. The Raptors' reign as NBA champions is officially over as they lost in Game 7 to the Boston Celtics, 92-87. It was a great series, a tough series, but at the end of the day, I think the better team won. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on Game 7, the series as a whole, and then I'm going to let you know what I think the Raptors should do moving forward if they want to improve this team and make another run at the championship. So let's go. With a trip to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat on the line, the Raptors decided to play like crap in Game 7, turning the ball over 18 times, leading to 31 points for the Boston Celtics. And obviously, public enemy number one in Toronto right now is Pascal Siakam. He averaged 23 points per game in the regular season, and he just hasn't looked like himself since the NBA restarted. In this series against Boston, he averaged just 15 points on 38% shooting and went 4 for 32 from 3. So clearly, he was not ready to be the go-to guy. And I think it's a little bit unfair of people to expect him to be that, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. Looking at some other guys too, Kyle Lowry, after that massive Game 6, he didn't show up in Game 7 either. He was 5 of 15 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. He fouled out late in the game. So the Raptors just weren't able to get over the hump, and this game was there for the taking. As good as Boston looked to start off that fourth quarter, and they built a little bit of a lead, the Raptors just stayed in that game. They were playing great defensively, but they just weren't able to make shots when it mattered and get over the hump. And someone who was able to make shots when it mattered and put the team on his back in Game 7 was Jason Tatum. He was unbelievable. 29 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 of 8 from 3. This guy is becoming a superstar before our eyes, and he was the best player in the series, and he got the Boston Celtics into the Eastern Conference Finals, where I'm sure they are going to have a great series and an absolute dogfight against the Miami Heat. Looking at the series as a whole, the Raptors were great defensively, and it's their defense that kept them in most games. I know that there was a couple of blowouts, but for the most part, the Raptors locked down defensively and gave themselves a chance. But where they just totally did not show up was on the offensive end. Of the 8 teams in the second round of the playoffs, the Raptors had the worst offensive rating, scoring just 100 points per 100 possessions, as opposed to what they were doing in the regular season with 110 points per 100 possessions. So they just weren't able to generate anything offensively against this quick Celtics D, especially in the half court. And the Raptors are a team that love to play that high-octane style, get out in transition. That's where a guy like Siakam scores a lot of his points and flourishes. But in the half court, you were just waiting for somebody to step up. And every game for the Raptors, you just didn't know who it was going to be. Because Lowry, he did have a few good games, but then there was games that Lowry didn't really show up, and Siakam was a no-show throughout the series. Ibaka, actually, I thought was probably the Raptors' most consistent offensive player, which is crazy to say. VanVleet, he was solid, but I mean, you can't just rely on Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet to carry your offense. And I think that's where the Raptors ran into trouble, and you could really just boil it down to this. In the games that Kyle Lowry scored more than 20 points, the Raptors won. The games he scored less than 20 points, the Raptors lost. So, like I said, game to game, when you're relying on Kyle Lowry to be that guy. When last season, if you remember, okay, Kawhi Leonard was the go-to guy, obviously. Pascal Siakam was the number 2, and Kyle Lowry was the Raptors' 3rd leading scorer. But this year, there was just such this burden on him to be the go-to offensive player. And as good as Kyle Lowry is, and as much as we all love him as Raptors fans, you cannot rely on him to be your primary scorer in a playoff series. So the Raptors are going to have to go back to the drawing board and find a way to upgrade this team, because the way the roster is constructed right now, there's no way they can win a championship. And just to make one more point on this, I think that the state of the Raptors offense can be summarized in literally one sequence in Game 6, okay? So if you remember when the game was tied in the first overtime, the Raptors ran an ISO play with Norman Powell, okay, to take the final shot in overtime to win the game. But if you're Nick Nurse, this is how you're looking at it, okay? You have Pascal Siakam, who can't create his own shot and looked absolutely lost. And then you have two undersized guards in Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet, who, as great as they are, they can't really create their own shot, with 15 seconds left in the game trying to take a game winner, right? So Nick Nurse was like, oh my God, my most athletic player right now who can make something happen is Norman Powell. And he was right. And that's kind of where the Raptors offense was, right? With Siakam being a no-show, with the two undersized guards, it's just so difficult to create in the half court, especially against a great defensive team like Boston. So clearly the Raptors are gonna have to go out and try to find a bucket getter and a franchise player like they had with Kawhi Leonard, who can take over games when they're tight in the fourth quarter of the playoffs. And obviously that's a lot easier said than done. As great as Jason Tatum was in the series, shout out to Marcus Smart, who really was the Celtics X factor. Averaged 16 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, made 3.5 threes per game. With Gordon Hayward going down, that took a big hit to the Celtics' depth. But Marcus Smart comes in, plays phenomenal defense. He's flying all over the court. He really is Boston's Kyle Lowry. He's that guy that you absolutely love him when he's on your team and you hate him when he's on the opposing team. But he was phenomenal. He was providing offense in moments just when the Celtics needed a bucket, when they needed a corner three, when they needed someone to make a big defensive play. I thought Marcus Smart was phenomenal in this series. And then he trolled the Raptors after Game 7 with a King of the North tweet. So, I mean, you know what? At the end of the day, you got to tip your cap to Boston and Marcus Smart, who was great in this series. All right, back to Pascal Siakam now, who clearly wasn't ready to be the Raptors' go-to guy in the playoffs, and honestly, probably never will be. But here's the thing. I think it is totally unfair of Raptors fans to be slandering this guy and expecting him to be the franchise player and just morph into Kawhi Leonard. I mean, what did people really expect? Ask yourself that, okay? Here's the thing with Pascal Siakam. He went from a dude who was a late first-round pick, who was an energy guy early in his career, averaging 7 points per game, then takes this massive leap to winning Most Improved Player, being the second best player on a championship team. And then the year after that, he becomes a starter in the All-Star game, was great this year, averaging 23 points a game. But, I mean, did we really expect him to lead this team to the championship in year one as the number one option? And just think about Pascal's game, okay? He's not a dude who is an ISO bucket getter. He's not a great shooter. He's an athletic, versatile player who scores in transition, plays great defense, can make things happen when he's driving to the bucket, but he's not a dude like Kawhi Leonard who can just get a bucket whenever he wants and score you 30 points in a playoff game. That is just not Siakam, and I think he's a lot better suited to be the second or third option on a really good team like we saw last season. So with all these people just knocking Siakam and saying that he blew it and he cost the Raptors, a chance at the championship this season, I think that's absolutely ridiculous, because I think we all needed to bring our expectations down a little bit with Siakam. And think about it. He's only 26 years old. This was his first season as the number one option on this team, and he's still navigating that. And it's different when you're in a 7-game playoff series against a great team like the Boston Celtics. You can't just expect someone to put up the same production they were doing in the regular season. The only guys that do that are the elite players in the league. So let's just be patient with Pascal Siakam. Give him a little bit of time. I'm sure he's going to come back stronger than ever. And I'm sure Masai Ujiri is already thinking of ways that he can bring in another superstar player to play along Pascal Siakam. So moving forward, Siakam signed to a max contract. Lowry has one more year left on his deal. OG Anunoby's still on his rookie contract. And you still have Norman Powell in the mix as well. But the Raptors have some big decisions to make, because Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka are both unrestricted free agents. $22 million for each of those guys is coming off the books. And listen, when it comes to Marc Gasol, that dude seriously looks totally washed at this point. He was great last season during the title run, but he fell off a cliff this year, especially in the playoffs. He looked totally lost offensively. So I don't know if the Raptors even consider bringing him back on a veteran's minimum contract perhaps, but I think they're probably going to move on from Gasol. But when it comes to Serge Ibaka, I really like what he brought to the Raptors this season. And like I said earlier, he was probably their most consistent scorer in the Celtics series, which is crazy to say, but he was a consistent presence off the bench. He's just a very smart player. He can score, he can defend, he's a great leader. He just brings some quality depth to your organization. So I think it would be fantastic for the Raptors to bring Ibaka back. Now, probably not at $22 million a year, but I think you got to find a way to re-sign Serge Ibaka. And then Fred VanVleet, right? This dude is going to want to get paid this year, okay? He had a great season. He broke out. He averaged 20 points a game in the playoffs. He's obviously a very important part of this Raptors team. But again, he's not your franchise player. He's more of a second or third option on a really good team. So, yes, it would be great to bring Fred VanVleet back, but I don't think you just throw him a max contract. You have to be really smart about this. And then the Raptors have to turn their attention to bringing in a go-to franchise player. And obviously that's a lot easier said than done because they don't have the option of doing that through the draft. They don't have a high draft pick, especially over the last number of years because they've been such a good team. So Masai has to look at making a trade. Maybe he turns his focus to luring Giannis as a free agent. So there's still a lot to play out in that regard. And I think fans need to be patient. I don't think that Masai is just going to flip a switch and make a Kawhi Leonard trade like he did last season. But we'll see what's out there. We'll see if there's another star player who is maybe on the trade block, right? And we'll see what happens in free agency. But moving forward, I still think the Raptors are in a nice spot. They have a solid foundation. And I think they're going to find a way to get right back into the playoffs next season. So it should be very, very interesting to see how Masai Ujiri handles this offseason. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts on the Raptors-Celtics series. And then I also want to know what you think the Raptors should do in the offseason to improve this team. Let me know in the comments. And as always, I would really appreciate it if you like the video, share it on social media, and subscribe to my channel, especially if you're a sports fan and want to see more content like this. It would really, really help me out. So that does it for this video, and I will see you guys next time.